I know, there you go. Go on. Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Look at that. Ace looks absolutely glorious, doesn't it? But the other day I was walking down those steps and I saw this. Aces have this habit of just occasionally giving you a bit of an issue with a dead branch and you end up with dieback. Interestingly, we inherited this tree and it's a beautiful plant, but it is in the wrong place. And later on in the year, it gets really scorched. So what I'm going to do is cut this branch off, and I wouldn't even normally touch an acer, but this is completely dead. But what I'm going to do differently, look down there. You see where somebody's pruned that before? They've done the classic prune. They've cut it close back to the stem, and the dieback has got nowhere to go. So what we're going to do on this one is we're going to do something that's going to look a little bit odd. We're going to take that off, and then we're going to leave that. And if there's any dieback, that'll actually die back to there. And then, at some point, I can maybe take that off. Coming up on today's programme. Francis meets a gardener who has spent 30 years designing his garden, with a little help from Mother Nature.
It's not that you've done nothing, is it? You've actually observed and left the space.
Well, if you can call doing nothing doing something, then yes, that's what we've done.
We meet a passionate grower in Manchester whose life is dominated by daffodils.
Well, growing daffodils is known in the fraternity as yellow fever. Once you get it, they reckon there's no known cure for it.
We join Rekha for the first time this year as she takes stock of a new garden.
After a year of learning about this garden, it has been a big change. It has been a big move, a big shift in how to garden in a different space.
And I will be adding some herbaceous perennials to my woodland border. It really is a good time of year just to get some herbs in the ground. And actually, what I'm going to do, because I've planted some bits up there already, I'm going to start to repeat plant, which will add to that rhythm that I'm creating going through. So the first one that's going to go in is this rosemary. It's called Miss Jessop's Upright. The label will say it'll grow to 2 metres. You're thinking, why am I planting that? Great thing about most of these herbs is they want using, they want clipping, you know, so I can shape this, I can form it. And if you're looking at the soil, there's some gravel in here. It's really, really well drained. Rosemary's a very, very handy herb to have in the kitchen. Beautiful sort of pale blue flower, and you get that wonderful aroma, which really wakes you up. So that one goes in there. This one, slightly different. It's a lovage. And lovage we think gets to 2 metres plus. This one, no, Scottish lovage. So only gets to about probably 60 centimetres. Beautiful flower, which is white, and then as it fades away, you get these wonderful seeds. Enjoys free draining conditions. We'll take a little bit of shade, to be honest. I dress salads with that. Those young leaves are beautiful. Across this side, we've got some fennel, some more of that lovage, and then these little beauties. So this is Corsican borage. You know, borage, big, lovely flowers. Well, this more or less is a mini version. Corsican gives you an idea of what it wants, sunny, well drained. You might read that it's quite short-lived. I haven't personally found that. But the one reason it's going here is we've got a big gravel path going up there, and to me it still looks a little harsh. This will seed beautifully, just in here, so it won't be invasive, just soften that edge off. What I love about this is there's a real charm to the flower. It's sort of more bell-like and a softer blue. In fact, it's not unlike the Composting, which I planted a few weeks ago. What's lovely about that borage is it'll clump, the leaves will darken, that texture will intensify, and the contrast with that Scottish lovage will be beautiful. So, all I've got to do is get those in now, but while I'm doing that, a couple of weeks ago we went to the Peak District to catch up with Rekha, who's busy planning what she's going to do in the garden this year.
It has been a very different start to my spring this year. Normally, I'd be up to my ears with plants, but not this year. I've taken stock of what's going on in my new garden. I've had a whole year here, and I can tell you, it's been a real learning curve. This has been the most shaded part of the garden, is something I've learned. And I planted Aromatic here. They don't like shade, they like hot sun, but they've survived. I can't believe they've come through. They will have to move at some point. My phlox, which was in front of them, that didn't do well, and that's gone. But I will rejig this whole section, knowing what will love this part of the garden. Some things have absolutely thrived. I planted garlic direct to the soil over the winter months. Now, I've never done that before. I've had to put them in pots and then plant them out in spring. And they have romped away. Same with the shallots. They're doing just as well. So I think I just need to be a bit more brave and do a lot more direct planting, because this is a free draining bed and they're all enjoying it. Over the winter months, we have been busy creating this compost bin area. I like to have it right in the middle of the garden. I don't like to hide it because I feel it is the heart of any garden. I love it, and it's already doing a great job. Being in the middle of the garden, all of the beneficial insects that live here have direct access to the plants. These ladybirds here have overwintered all around this compost area, and now they are everywhere. Like most small gardens, we create a lot of green waste from leafy material, which is nitrogen rich, but not too much brown or woody material, which is carbon heavy. So I add cardboard to mine as a substitute. This makes wonderful compost and a rather wonderful bug hotel too. One of the seeds I'm trying this year is capers, because I really like to eat them. So why can't I grow them? I've put it in the fridge to stratify, to give it a cold spell, and then I soak it for 2 days. And now I'm sowing it in some seed compost. I'll cover them up with about a couple of centimetres of sieved compost. It's a plant from the Mediterranean, and they hate fluctuation in temperature, so it's going to become a greenhouse plant. I had to buy this in, but I like to save my own seeds because I know a saved seed works far better in the environment that you've grown it in. I have various varieties, but there is one seed that I saved that's going to do very well, is my edamame bean. All I'm going to do is put it in some paper pots, fill it with seed compost, and then put 2 seeds at a time. And as soon as they've germinated, what I will do is I'll put them into the cold frame where they can start hardening off. And when the chance of frost has disappeared, I have a very special place for them to grow in. This is the hottest part of my garden, and this is going to be the home for my edamame beans. This is a sun trap, this is a powerhouse for my vegetables. I've got slabs laid down. That means I have to grow everything in pots. And that's something I'm not used to. So that's going to be a very big learning curve for me. Last year, I grew really good peas for the first time, but they were the green variety. This year, I'd like to try some purple podded peas. Not only will they taste great, but I think they look really nice in amongst all the flowers that will be intermingling with the purple colour. I've chosen Shiraz purely because they are a shorter variety, and growing them in terracotta pots, I know the roots will be able to breathe and take up any moisture that is held by the terracotta. I've put 8, and I think that is more than enough for this size of a pot. This year, I'm going to grow my tomatoes, yes, outdoors, but all in pots. And that is something I've never done. And so let's see what happens. But the other thing I want to grow outdoors is my aubergine. There is one variety, Black Beauty, which I know will do well because it has been bred in this country. So fingers crossed, those aubergines are going to produce a lot of fruit. I want to be water wise with all my pots. So this year I'm trying a traditional olla pot. Any water I put in here, it'll seep out as the tree needs it. It'll work well. After a year of learning about this garden, it has been a big change. It has been a big move, a big shift in how to garden in a different space. But that's what gardening is. Gardening is change. And that change is going to put that smile back on my face. Whatever happens, it's going to be fun, and I can't wait.
Come on, you're in the way. What are you up to? Rekha's on that same journey as me. I've only been here a couple of years, and it takes a few years to really understand the space. But even after all these years of having my hands in the soil, gardening still blows my mind. Look at that. I put those asparagus in about 12 months ago, and you're meant to leave them for 3 years instead of cutting them so that they concentrate on the root growth. But I have never seen asparagus come up the first year that thick, and I desperately want to cut it, but I can't. But I think that'll be worth the wait. Come on, Ash, let's go. It's that time of year, isn't it? You come out without the coat, and then it's freezing cold, and you go back in. You come out with the coat, and the sun comes out. So, next job. Look at that, English bluebells. Is there anything more glorious than walking into a woodland and seeing these spreading across the floor? I'm going to plant some right on the edge of this tree, and I'm going to work them back into more shady conditions. Remember, at the moment, this Prunus saluda, which is looking absolutely glorious, the moment those flowers go, this is going to start to leaf up, and this becomes a little bit more shady. Back in sort of late September, early October, what I did was I bought a lot of bulbs, and then I potted them up myself in compost. It's a way of getting your bulbs going earlier in the year. But the bigger reason really is because of the change in the weather. I worry a lot now. If I'd have put that tiny little bulb in you know, back in September, early October, and we've had the winter that we've had, those poor little bulbs are going to be sat there, you know, in puddles all the way through the winter. But by containerising them, I can control the conditions. So these have been tucked next to a hedge right over the winter, so they've been out of most of the rain. And the success rate, probably about 95 to 98%. And you think, what if we had a really dry winter? I could have given them a couple of waters. So we're just going to try a couple there. Trying to concentrate on this, and I've got like blue tits flying in and out of the garden. And I've put up, well, it's sparrow accommodation, but he's flying in and out and he keeps making a load of noise. Gardens are all about moments. These little spaces outside your back door, they become magical. They're living and they're alive. Anyway, back to the bluebells. Please don't go out into a woodland and start digging up bluebells, and people do, and they try and sell them on, and so make sure when you're buying from a reputable source. So there you go. What I'll do now is give these a really good soaking in. And then the other key thing really with bluebells is don't disturb them. Hopefully they'll settle in, they'll do their business, and if they're really happy, they'll start to seed themselves around. Now, I do love a bulb, but I grow mine in the garden. Some people take that growing to a whole new level. And a few weeks ago, we caught up with Ken Harrop, who I would say definitely loves a daffodil.
I've been growing daffodils since 2006 when I started off with 20 bulbs, and I'm now probably in the region of about 1,500 bulbs. Daffodils herald the start of spring and sets us on the path for another season. And the vibrant colours just wakes you up after a winter in Manchester, which can be a bit grim sometimes. Well, growing daffodils is known in the fraternity as yellow fever. Once you get it, they reckon that there's no known cure for it, and you just keep getting more and more daffodils. And this is my collection of daffodils, about 160 varieties here, and we've probably got about 45, 50 seedlings. This is the most exciting time for daffodil growers. It's the culmination of 6 months' work, and day upon day, different flowers come out. I won't admit to being obsessed. Committed, yeah, definitely. They're very time-consuming in terms of making sure that everything's ticking over all right, and not quite a full-time job, but sometimes I'm sure my wife feels as though it is a full-time job. When we got married, I was growing chrysanthemums, so she knew what I was going to be like, I suppose. You can notice all my daffodil collection is in pots, and they're in pots because it enables me to move them about. I can move them in the greenhouse, but in the main, if you don't want any rain damage, any weather damage, they don't spend anything like their total life under here. They're only under here for about 3 to 4 weeks. And 5 in a pot. I sometimes say that daffodil bulbs are like sheep, that they like to be together, that they definitely don't like to be one in a pot. Whether they feel lonely, I don't know. My favourite variety at the moment, looking around the plot, is got a particularly good variety called Ombersley. Beautiful colour, trumpet daffodil, whereas the trumpet is longer than the length of the perianth petals at the back. This is a relatively new variety, it's been recently named. It's called Orange Trim. It's a small cup daffodil. in respect that the perianths are a lot longer than the depth of the cup. Double daffodil, variety is called ballistic, and it consists of multi-layers of perianth petals interspersed with the corona in between the layers of petals. And these are called tazetas. Multi-headed, as many as 15 to 20 little flowers on a stem. They do have the heady, sweet scent. This variety is named Pebble Mill, and named after, and this is going back some time, the BBC programme. This year, this variety has produced the best flowers for me that I've ever had. Why? It's nature's way of balancing things up. It's owed me a flower for the last 3 years it's performed, but this year it's done admirably. If I knew the reason why, I'd bottle it. I have the privilege of being able to grow my exhibition daffodils within the confines of the plot. I started off showing at our local spring show here in Tameside with a reasonable amount of success for the first couple of years, and then you think, I can do a bit better than this, and you buy a few more bulbs and a few more bulbs, and then it went on from there. You know, that's what it's all about, is competing. I mean, you've got to have an end game, and the end game is being on the show bench. The ultimate accolade at a show is probably the best bloom in the show, and that's what we're basically looking for. Feels good. Yeah, gives you a bit of stardom for half an hour. And then next week you get beat. The buds of daffodils, when they're coming up from the base, come up between the middle of the leaves, they have a protective sleeve. For exhibition purposes, we will pull the sleeve back so that the flower petals can develop without any damage being caused by the sleeve. This is the ever-dependable Ombersley. This one's earmarked for a show this weekend. This particular flower here, it's looking at me straight in the eye saying, I'm the best of this pot. They don't all grow like this perfectly. This particular variety is relatively good at producing symmetrical flowers, but they don't all come symmetrical. As you can see on this one here, it is slightly tilted, but with a little technique called clocking, where we twist the flower on the stem from the seed head, you can very quickly get it to perform as near to symmetrical as what you can. Secret to success, attention to detail. Doing the right things at the right time. Some of it's knowledge, some of it's experience, but just good gardening.
I really enjoyed that. I loved that attention to detail and the tiny tricks just to get the perfect bloom on a particular day. And what about yellow fever? Do you think you got that? Mine's quite simple. I haven't got yellow fever, it's just plant fever. And this tendency to keep buying them. We have just had the most horrendous hailstorm. I'm over there planting away, sun on my back. Now my hands are cold and I'm a little bit shivery. Look at that. Peony, Molly the Witch, and it's just about to have its moment. Lovely sort of glaucous foliage, wonderful red stems, and that ball of yellow just sitting at the top. But there's one little thing I want to get on with. So, this is Disporum longistillum. And it's beautiful plant, just starting to come into flower there. Wonderful sort of soft, yellowy, bell-shaped flower. Instead of tidying up the old foliage earlier on in the season, I leave it. Because when these growths come up, to start with, they're not that strong. And if we have a change in the weather and it starts blowing a gale, it can really start to push it over. So what I do is leave the old growth, and once I feel that that's strong enough, I'm now going to go back in and just take last year's growth out. Well, you can see last year's growth because it's still got the dark berry. So we're just going to go down, find the old growths and nip them off at the bottom and work their way through. Decided here that I was going to use foliage colour to give this little north space a bit of a sparkle. And variegation in leaves is something that people either love or they don't. But geranium phaeum springtime, it's incredible variegated leaf. And actually that variegation gets picked up in the podophyllum. That actually is called spotty dotty, and it's my eldest daughter's favourite plant. So if you have got a dark little spot, you know, don't be fearful of variegation. Last one out, I think. Now look at this. Absolutely fantastic flowers coming. Once the flowers come, the leaves will start to push on. And we know now that that's going to provide interest right through to this time next year. It's a cracker, isn't it? Now, it's time for one of your films. And Chris Miller from Cardiff, he's having a major rethink.
Hello Gardeners World, my name is Chris and welcome to my small urban garden in sunny South Wales. Today's a big day. After 7-8 years of having an AstroTurf lawn, I'm actually going back to turf for many reasons, but I've been very conscious of habitat in my garden and I've created some lovely habitat spaces, and the only thing I need to do now is to get back to a good old-fashioned lawn. One thing I've done is I've added some height to this side of the garden, which was low level before, and I've used some oiled oil cans and planted up these trees, 2 rowans and a couple of silver birches and a lovely apple tree right here in the centre. So, you know, things for pollinators, places for birds to rest in, lots of insects around, and it means the birds stop by in the garden rather than flying straight over. So here we go, I've got 10 square metres. Here's Mabel, and I've got 10 rolls of turf. Wish me luck, and I'll show you how it looks when I'm done. Okay, a couple of hours later, I've laid the turf. I've put some compost in some of the joins. So yeah, looking forward to this taking hold now and establishing. It's going to be a lot cooler in the summer. We've had lots of sap coming down from the trees up here and making the AstroTurf really sticky and smelly. So I'm hoping that everything's going to be able to be nicely washed away. Obviously, brilliant for the environment having a lawn, and goodbye to the turf. I am reusing it in 2 places, in an old allotment shed and on a small patch of concrete of my dad's. So it's not going to landfill, it is being repurposed, and obviously, you know, it's never too late to change back to a grass lawn. Cheers guys, take care, bye bye.
Chris, I think you seem to have found the final piece in the jigsaw for your wildlife garden. Good on you. Right, you young lady can come out the way. No, you can come out the way. Come here, come here. No, 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 no. Sit down, good girl. Right, stay. What I was going to say is it's that time of year just to repair the lawn. You're going to get damage to your lawn for various different reasons. So the first thing I'm going to do is just loosen up where the old turf was. Because you've cut the grass, you've walked on it, it might be slightly compact, and get rid of any debris. So I've got this compost mix. So this is compost, soil and some sand, horticultural sand that is. And I'm just rubbing that into the surface. A bit more of that. Rub that in there. And just work that in just a little bit. That gives me a really good surface to sow on. Then grass seed, and we don't need that much. If you're doing a larger area, read what it says on the side of the packet, and I would weigh out enough to cover a square metre, then visually it'll give you a really good idea. So once we've done that, what we're going to do next is just take a little bit of fleece. But not only will it give an extra bit of protection from the birds sort of helping themselves, but on top of that it will just help with germination where there's a change in temperature. And then all we're going to do is pin that down, give that a good watering in, and you can guarantee this time of year that'll be germinated in a couple of weeks. Still to come on today's programme. Francis takes inspiration from a garden appropriately named Wind in the Willows.
There's something very romantic and quintessentially British and classic about this. I feel like it could be in a book with a picnic, sitting by the stream. It's really lovely.
And we meet a couple taking a beautiful balcony scene from their home in London to the RHS Chelsea Flower Show.
We have two balconies. This is our bedroom balcony. And then we also have one coming off our lounge. And yeah, they've been maxed out, I think it's fair to say.
Hello, young man. I've come to disturb you. I'm going to plant these plants here. You might remember last time you were here with me, I was clearing this area. So this is my woodland border. Lifted the canopies of the trees and cleared the area. I then planted the shrubs. So I'm very much building in layers. And today, the fun bit is the herbaceous perennials. What I'm going to do is use a border down there. So underneath the hedge last year, I lifted the canopy and I turned it into a tiny little woodland garden. And I've got some beautiful plants down there. What I'm trying to do is use those to start to drive this. I'm looking at the shapes of the leaves, the finishes, the forms, and I've got all those as little visual references. So if I come down to this one to start with, this is called Saruma Hemrii. Absolutely stunning. Lovely sort of heart-shaped leaf. It feels beautiful. These lovely sort of soft lemon flowers. It will get to about 40-45 centimetres. It will do the same coverage. It's related to wild ginger. And in fact, actually, its common name is upright wild ginger. And I came across it a few years ago, but it's such a little showstopper. And straight away, I can see there's a lovely link with the shape of the Paris over there. So we just keep building. Next up is this little beauty. And this is Dispolaropsis pernii, which is actually related to Solomon's seal. Got that lovely sort of vertical growth, but when you look at the stem, it's beautiful speckling. That will get up to probably about 40 centimetres and then start to relax. But the flower that you can see just coming there has a sort of lemony scent to it. And straight away, you know, it's got a relationship with the Solomon seal that's down in that other border. I do get the sense sometimes I get a little bit overexcited when I'm doing this, but it is the best bit, isn't it? So now we're on to one that a lot of people would have heard of. So this epimedium is called Niveum. Lovely little white flower on it. A really good ground cover. Just tease those roots away, and then in that goes. And again, different flower shape, but also different leaf shape. I think that's the decent start, and I'll finish this over the next 3-4 weeks. On that note, Francis went to Buckinghamshire last May to see a garden that has been created over the last 30 years.
Creating a garden from scratch on a blank canvas takes an awful lot of time and patience. But when that garden is flanked by running water and meandering streams, that's surely the garden design gift. Well, perhaps, but it also takes a lot of trial and error before you get the balance of that design absolutely right. This 3-acre woodland dell was created by Ron James, who spent the last 30 years developing this site that wraps around his house. And it's absolutely lovely. There's something very romantic and quintessentially British and classic about this. I feel like you could be in a book with a picnic, sitting by the stream. It's really lovely. So, Ron, this is obviously beautiful now, but what did this look like when you first moved in?
A bit more like a field than a garden.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, when my mother came to look at it for the first time, that was exactly what she said. Ron, I don't call this a garden, I call it land. However, we've planted trees since then, but the copper beech was here behind you.
Oh, okay.
The oak tree and the tulip tree we actually put in. It's variegated, which is slightly unusual, but I like variegated things because they provide some colour even after the flowers are gone.
They really blend with the existing trees, don't they?
They do quite well, yeah. 30 years ago, we didn't realise that it was going to look like this, but it had lots and lots of potential, and in particular, the rivers that you won't find everywhere.
Stunning, aren't they? This is so beautiful, isn't it?
It is beautiful. It was just a river when we came. I knew absolutely nothing about what would grow in rivers when we moved in here. I had no idea that the candelabras would do so well.
They're amazing, aren't
I've
they?
always loved irises, but the idea of ornamental plants in a river was completely new, and it took some years to learn.
And you have to, as with any garden, work with the conditions that you've got. There would be no point in you trying to grow Mediterranean herbs because they wouldn't survive.
One thing I have learned now is to decide where the plant is going to go before I buy it, rather than buying it and then saying, where can we put this one? I like this plant.
I think all gardeners do that, don't they?
They do. Planting things too close together, which are going to grow, that's another common mistake.
Well, I will do that because I'm a gardener and I want lots and lots and lots of plants. This is incredible. Look at all these primulas. Have you planted these?
So we didn't actually plant any of these. They came here as seedlings, probably on the wind. It's a particularly damp area of the garden, and each year they just spread and spread and spread.
They've done the design work for you as well, haven't they? There's beautiful pink and white tones, and it's just absolutely spectacular. I've never seen them do this before.
They look bright, and so we've left them there to grow and multiply.
And it's not that you've done nothing, is it? You've actually observed and left the space.
Well, if you can call doing nothing, doing something, then yes, that's what we've done.
Keep doing more of that. Are these fritillary seed heads?
They are. The whole area before the hostas come up is completely covered with them. And I leave them to go to seed because that means we get more and more of them.
They're so stunning. But it's nice having that succession.
It
And then your
is.
hostas are fully up and very unblemished. Well, almost, not a hole in sight.
Almost, almost. But it was a visit to the garden that probably gave me the answer. And that's the ducks, which are up and down in the river, also like to eat the slugs. It leaves the hostas looking fairly good.
I mean, the hostas bring the green, which is always nice anyway, isn't it? But I like the different variegations. Is it a particular love of yours, hostas?
It is. I can't get over the number of different varieties they are. And I always say that if you go get a paint box with yellow, white and green in it, said paint some leaves, they'd never come up with this many combinations of those colours.
True.
They are amazing.
And did you plant this redwood?
Yeah, about 15 or 20 years ago, they grow very, very quickly.
And very, very big.
And it will grow very, very big, much too big for this garden in 100, 200 years' time.
You're never too far from the river in this garden, and look, this little weir here is so lovely. But there are parts of the garden that are drier, so sometimes you have to choose species that can be versatile, and iris is a classic one. So for example, this is Iris pseudochorus, the common flag iris, and there's Iris levigata just behind it. Both of those can cope with very wet ground, in fact completely soaked, or even grow in the river itself. And they're so beautiful. Look at those delicate colourings. They sort of herald the end of spring or the beginning of summer. But then things like Iris siberica, the Siberian iris, grows in quite versatile ground, not in the water. If you have a really hot, dry spot, then the bearded iris is perfect because they need the rhizome to bake in the sun to get the flowers going. So there is something for everybody. I couldn't resist coming back after Ron showed me the bridge to have a closer look at the planting along the edge of this. It's really beautiful. I mean, a bog garden can be a thing of beauty anyway, so if you have a very damp, permanently damp space, you could use any of these plants. So there's lovely persicaria, and it's really, really glorious. It's quite a big flower that comes out at the same time as these candelabra primulas, but also the Metusius drudiopterus, or shuttlecock fern. There's all kinds of moisture-loving plants, and he's used them to very good effect, but he's luckily got the space in which to do it. If you didn't have that, you could bury some plastic that you've punctured and create a permanently wet space, but just using what you've naturally got is usually the best way to get a really, really good effect. As the river moves away from the house, the garden becomes much wilder. Things like just a mown path in the grass rather than gravel, and letting the cow parsley and the other wildflowers stay. And clearly that's lovely because you go on a journey from garden to wilderness. But also it's a design decision by Ron because he couldn't possibly maintain everything to the standard it is by the house. So even though he's been here for 30 years as a gardener, knowing when to step back and let nature do its thing is a real skill.
I couldn't agree with Francis more. That idea of just slowing down. We make ourselves too busy, taking a moment, looking, observing. That's the time that you work out how to move the garden forward. I love just coming up here. Just as everything starts to calm down a little bit and you get the sound of the birds. And the world seems just a slightly better place. Doesn't it, mate? Eh? This is quite a relaxing job, to be fair. It's probably feeling a little bit odd for a lot of people, but these tree ferns now, they've come through the winter really well, but you can see the damage and there's loads of leaves really browning off. So what I'm doing is just tidying them up. But I'm mindful it's still the end of April and all these lovely little sort of new croziers are starting to come. And though these are fine in the winter because this is a sheltered spot, what I have found is if we have a late frost, those tips get caught. So what I'm gonna do is give them little hats. And this will only go on for about probably 3 weeks. And I'm not going to do it over tight because if I leave that loose at the top there, as they start to sort of unwind, I'm not going to distort that growth. So once we've done that, tie them round nice and neat. There you go. It might feel slightly odd, but that new growth is vulnerable. That will stay on there probably for 2 or 3 weeks. But what's lovely about this space is you come through that gate, and because of the tree ferns and the underplanting, there's a real surprise, and it feels probably slightly otherworldly. And on that note, we're now off to London to meet a couple that have worked wonders with their balcony, but they're not stopping there. They're going to take that concept to the RHS Chelsea Flower Show. Mike McMahon and Julesy Matthews are both passionate amateur gardeners who believe anyone can make a big impact, even in the smallest of spaces.
I first got into gardening around the age of 6 or 7.
Yeah, so neither of us have any formal horticultural training. I'd say my training has come very much through Mike's built upon knowledge. There's a look that I've come to recognise in Mike's eyes. And then he said, should we enter Chelsea Flower Show? Yeah, why not? So in 7 days, we had to pull together the whole of the design for the balcony garden.
So we're in a rooftop garden floating above central London. I worked on this building and I was the project architect, and I also collaborated with the landscape designer who created this wonderful moorland garden. I've always had a huge interest in nature, so I love to try and encourage nature into buildings that I work on. The last few years, climate change has come home. In London, we had temperatures in the mid-40s, which is insane. Trees and greenery absorb carbon and provide shade, but they also release moisture, which helps cool the area. Whilst we're on a very large roof covered in planting, it's not the scale that matters. You can put a plant anywhere. When I see empty balconies, I just see the potential for greenery. You know, if everybody did a little bit, it would all add together for the collective good. Although Julesy and I had quite a tight deadline to submit our garden for Chelsea Flower Show, we were actually quite confident of what can be achieved with the smallest of spaces, because we've done it at home for years. Here it is, our junglet balconies.
So yeah, we have 2 balconies. This is our bedroom balcony. And then we also have one coming off our lounge. And yeah, they've been maxed out, I think it's fair to say.
So we have Dixonia antarctica here, which is one of my favourite plants because it just has these huge big fronds, and it's just amazing watching these roll out at this time of the year. The perfect tree fern for Britain because you can grow it pretty much everywhere. We've added different plants that at different times of the year they flower. When the wisteria comes out, gosh, I have to stop for a moment just to enjoy. The African daisies just provide greenery around whilst the wisteria has lost its leaves in the winter. By the time we get to the summer, there's, you know, hundreds and hundreds of flowers. The thing I love the most about balconies is that, you know, you have a series of pots, how they fit, and you don't have to say, well, here's the vegetable garden, here's the children's garden. Our whole thing is jumbled in. If you want to have a tree fern, you can have a tree fern. If you want to have a pond with fish, I just think it's so exciting. If you're contemplating doing this at home, you'd need to consider weight. You get this illusion that there's a serious amount of weight here, but there's actually a lot of tricks in play. All the weight I've followed where the beams are. So the middle is actually recycled plastic pots, which you never ever see. You know, and some of the plants, and they're elevated into the air on old beer cans because they're very light. The main bit of maintenance, I would say, is in watering. Summers are getting hotter here, you need to go around and drench, especially the tree ferns, which you water from the top and completely soak them. And also, because the pots aren't in the ground, it's important that you do feed them from time to time.
When it's in full flow in the thick of summer, we have our own slice of Kerala right here in central London. So this is the backwaters of Kerala, where my ancestral heritage is from. My dad grew up in India in this incredible, lush, jungly landscape. You could say it runs through our veins. But I would also say it's Mike who's brought it into our little haven in London. This is our first Chelsea Flower Show that we'll be exhibiting at. We were in India with my dad, and Mike rushed in and was just like, "We got it!"
So here's the initial concept sketch. So we have roughly 350 different plants, and we have 26 different species. And so the planting itself replicates the 4 layers of the rainforest. We have some of the Dixonia and the Cyathea cooperi, but we have a few more unusual plants. And we'll have colocacia bursting through and zanzidaceas and loads of different plants just kind of exploding outwards.
I think success for us is really about seeing the start of a change in the way that we see buildings and balconies. And if people start becoming inspired to start thinking about what they can do, then that for me is real success.
Mike and Julesy, I wish you all the luck in the world. I look forward to seeing the garden and yourselves at the Chelsea Flower Show. I can't believe, though, we're nearly into show season. It seems to come round so quickly. So we've got Chelsea Flower Show, but then in June we have Gardeners World Live at Birmingham. And guess what? I have decided to throw my hat back in the ring and do a garden. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the next few weeks. So, these are what I call my holiday pots. And we are travelling a little bit around the world. We're going to go to Mexico, we're going to go to China, and then we're going to go to East Asia. So this one is Agave mitis. Absolutely stunning. Sword-like leaves, very, very slow grower. As I said, from Mexico. So it's going to love those sunny, well-drained conditions. So what I'm going to do first is put some crocks in the bottom so we make sure that drainage is really good. And then the compost mix, there's probably about 40% grit in there, 10% topsoil, lovely red tinges to the spikes on the edge, so just be careful with it. Make sure that these plants in the winter, as much as anything, are kept really, really dry. And then we're just going to top dress with some grit. So there we go. Now we're off to East Asia. So this is Begonia grandis, and this is called claret jug. Lovely pink flower in the summer. We'll get to probably 20, 30 centimetres. This mix is peat-free compost, small amount of soil, but then I've added just a little bit of composted bark to help hold some moisture. And if you think woodland floor, moist conditions, but not too wet. But these will keep going year on year. All I'm doing is just working those in carefully and then gently water it in. It will go back in a shady little protected spot. Probably for the next 3 or 4 weeks. It'll start to get some rooting and then it can come out. There you go. That is East Asia in a bowl. Now we're off to China. I saw this plant and it just caught my eye. That is called Impatiens omiana. Look at the stem colour and you've got that lovely pale lime right down the centre of that leaf. So clumps up, probably to about 40, 50 centimetres, and flowers later on in the year. What you don't want to do is disturb those roots too much. It will take cold conditions down to -15, but that's fine if it's really, really dry. So what I'm going to do is definitely put this back in the greenhouse. Let's just wedge another one in there. Carefully, carefully. I tell you what, I'm really pleased with that. So, while I go and put this in the greenhouse, here's a few jobs you could be doing at the weekend. Herbaceous perennials like my beautiful peonies are putting on lots of new growth, and in a few weeks' time could fall over after a heavy downpour. To help prevent this, I like to get my supports in early. These metal stakes work well for me, but bamboo canes and twine do a good job too. Whatever you use, make sure you push in gently and don't constrict the plant too much. If you haven't got round to planting any potatoes, there's still time. And if you're short of space, grow them in containers like I do. All you need is a few tubers and a large pot with peat-free compost in the bottom. 3 is plenty in this case. Cover with compost, and as soon as you see signs of new growth, bury it with more compost. A bit at a time until the container is full. Keep well watered, and within a few months you'll have lots of tasty spuds to eat. Small garden ponds need checking over every now and then, and mine could do with a tidy up. Remove any dead leaves or stems rotting under the water, along with any debris floating on the surface. And when you've finished, leave the material on the side for a few hours so that any creatures can crawl back into the water. Come on in, you. Come on, little fella. Hey, there we go, you help yourself. Go on. All right? Yes, I know. Oh. It's that time, young man. We've got to say bye-bye. I'm afraid that is it from us this week. But Monty will be back next week at Longmeadow, later time of 9 o'clock. But in the meantime, look after yourselves, and bye-bye from myself. And Ash, of course. Are you going to say bye-bye?